Kia ora and welcome to the Niggly Niche Cast. I'm the Diggly Dude, Dr. Papatoe Panther with the football slippers on today, joined by Aotearoa's footballing extraordinaire, the Wobbly Wildcard, and we are going to talk through a range of footballing matters. We'll touch on the Wellington Phoenix, because the Wildcard is all over that little situation with the club preparing for another season under a new coach, and we are going to get the Wildcard's thoughts and opinions on what is becoming the never-ending list of Kiwi footballers doing amazing things around the world. And the Wildcard is Aotearoa's expert on the Flying Kiwis. So we'll touch on the females and the males to see what is happening around the Flying Kiwis world. Support the Niche Case on Patreon. That's the best way to support us. We are about to record our second Patreon-only podcast. We're going to do like the first three just for everyone to just show people what we're up to on Patreon, and then we'll close those off just for our patrons. So support us on Patreon if you do enjoy what we're up to. That's the best way to support us. Otherwise, likes, comments, subscriptions, rates, and reviews, and all that stuff is greatly appreciated as well. And just show us that you're out there supporting what the Niche Case is up to, and especially listening to the Niche Cast. It'll be interesting if you can tell us where you're listening from and what episodes you're liking and just all that good stuff. Wobbly Wildcard, how's it going?
Nice and wobbly at the start of the football season in Europe, but also the start of the week when Flying Kiwis requires a lot of energy and research. So yeah, wobbly is a good way to start.
Wobbly as always, and as wobbly as the Wellington Phoenix are in this FFA Cup competition.
Yeah, I'm not sure if wobbly is the right word for them, because they don't seem to wobble, they just seem to fall. They've lost, I think, 5 out of the 6 games they've played in this competition. I think it's 5 years, and they've been eliminated in the first round 4 times. They've been eliminated in the first round in consecutive years by NPL opposition now. But, you know, I thought obviously a lot of people were a bit frustrated at the results and that kind of thing, and saying like this Phoenix team once again disappointing in this competition. But the competition is rigged against them. They have to play away against an Aussie team in the middle of their preseason. NPL teams are almost harder than the A-League teams, because the A-League teams is preseason and it's deep into preseason. It's still 2 months before the actual season starts. NPL teams are hot in the middle, nearing up the end of their tournaments, so they're pretty well fired up. Obviously a lower standard of player, you'd imagine, on pretty much every count, but this is just the way it goes. The Phoenix, as much as Uffie Talai said he wanted to win every competition and every game, you do have to be realistic when they do lose on penalties in a game like this, having come back from 2-0 down, which I thought showed more than enough promise to balance out the fact that if you take off the expectations of them should be able to win, and of them should being able, I'm not sure exactly how to get these words out, the fact that they should have been able to beat a team like this on paper, because obviously the actual context is very different to just looking at the team and saying these guys are better. So yeah, I think there was a lot of promise there. I thought there were some moments where they showed glimpses, was the word I used in the write-up. They showed glimpses of really enjoyable attacking football with just fluid passing moves and really quick stuff as well, like little 1-2 touch stuff, just moving, charging through the lines and turning defense into attack nice and quickly. And guys like Callum McCowart and Cam Devlin looks pretty good, this young Aussie fella. I thought they did really well at linking up and just being available and drifting around in those sort of attacking midfield positions. David Ball looked really good until he started taking penalties, and then suddenly didn't look so great. So here's hoping he's not one of them confidence players who's going to overthink things and dwell on that. The defense was less than at full strength, obviously, without Stephen Taylor there, and I still think they need to sign another centre-back, and they've got one more import spot, and it'd be pretty interesting to see what they do. Even since then, they've signed this German fella, Matty Steinman, so there's another one for the midfield there, and he'll probably play alongside Alex Rufer in the position Tim Payne played in this game. Tim Payne, I thought, did quite well in this game too, but Payne is also, I guess, another I think he's going to struggle to play centre back in the A-League. I think he's more of a midfield at that level, but I mean, he is at least a backup option, someone who could fill in there as well. Tiarafai Hudson-Wihongi, who played right back in this game, he's another guy who could play centre back. So maybe they don't. It's just a matter of how much you trust these utility guys. But looking at the game, like, not only were they short on match fitness and deep into their, the opposite of deep, really, isn't it? Really shallow into their preseason. They're about halfway through. It's roughly 2 months from that game until their first A-League game, and it was roughly 2 months going backwards in the other direction since Stefan Marinovic signed, who was the first signing from outside of the club, like excluding guys who re-signed for the season last year. He was the first outside incoming transfer. So yeah, that's a bit of context worth considering looking at the game. So you do have to look at it at more of a granular level and take little elements out of it. And I think if you do that, I saw a lot of reasons to think that the Phoenix can have a good, exciting, entertaining style of play this year. I think add in some of those more reliable defensive options, more experienced fellas, particularly the captain Stephen Taylor. And I think that would all make a pretty big difference to the way they would look in the proper season. So I don't think there's as much to worry about as some people do. And I think I actually was, based on what I saw there, I'm actually quite excited for what's to follow. I'm a little bit more hyped up than I was before the game, even though they lost. Funny how those things go.
So just for the more casual fan, how much emphasis and focus do you believe the Wellington Phoenix place on FFA Cup fixtures, games, and the Cup in general?
Well, Mark Rudin last year, it was 0. He didn't care. He didn't look at all disappointed after they lost. He treated it very much as a preseason friendly, and that's an understandable way to think about it. Uffie was more competitive about it. He just seems to be a guy who doesn't like to lose at anything. Like, I imagine playing table tennis with his kids and whatever. He's the guy who's, hitting slams, fire off the back wall, So he picked the strongest team he had available, but that strongest team had 2 of their 3 signed imports out injured. Obviously wasn't going to push them in a game like this, which, okay, you want to win, but you're not going to do anything stupid that's going to affect your actual season down the line. And, there one other import has signed since, and there's another import spot yet to be filled. So it was a team that was well short on its being at its best. Joshua Soterio as well, Aussie striker / attacking midfielder, wasn't available. He was injured. So it's I think they tried to win for sure, and they went out there looking to play their style of football. They weren't half-assing anything. They weren't just treating it as a run around the park. But yeah, I think the context kind of dictated things for them a little bit, and it made it harder. And I think because of that, I don't think they're too devastated to have lost. I'll put it that way.
And just another quick question on the Wellington Phoenix. Have you seen any change in how they are playing their football between the Mark Rudin season and now under coach Uffie Talai?
Well, one game with a weakened squad is hard to judge, but certainly there is the obvious difference, which is that Talai's brought in the Sydney FC formation of last year, which is sort of like a 4-2-2-2, where you got 2 strikers up front. You got, I would say a flat back four, but it's not really flat because you're asking your fullbacks to do a lot of work getting forward, which is probably good for the Phoenix because our fullbacks tend to be better at that than they are at the defensive side of things, particularly on the right-hand side, where everyone basically is a converted winger or is something. Then you've got like the 2 sort of holding midfielders. Like, they're not really holding midfielders, they're more box-to-box midfielders, but yeah, they do need to be able to slip into defense. And then you've got, in between the midfield and the attack, you've got 2 sort of roaming playmaker type roles, which I think is going to be quite interesting. It's going to be a little bit more difficult to build with width, which is something Rudin was a little more into by having one central playmaker and the wing backs, the back 3. So there's certain obvious differences that are going to come from just that style of play. They're going to be a little more fluid this time. I think they're going to be looking to play a few more of those, quick passes side of thing, because that's the way they're going to be able to get through. If you're stacking guys in the middle, you got to play quick and technical if you're going to be able to do anything. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck. With Rudin, it was very much like, let's just get the ball in behind the defence for Roy Christian to run onto for the first half of the season. Then that got shut down, and they struggled, to be honest, for quite a while to figure out other ways of scoring. And I think Talai is going to bring more balance. Rudin was more of a defensive-minded guy, but it's not like his team played negatively. They just played a bit more pragmatically. I think this season we're probably going to see them being a bit more fluid, a bit more, I don't want to say creative, because there's different ways to be creative, but I don't know, I think they might play a quicker pace. I think they might be a bit more, I'm going to go back to that word exciting again, because based on what I saw in that game, I quite like. I think I prefer the way that they're looking to play this way. Whether they actually are successful during that is a whole other matter, because entertainment comes down to results a lot of the time. And if they're losing but trying to play fun football, then it's not as much fun as if you're playing a little more reserved and actually winning games. But we'll see how it goes. Because I think the one thing about the Rudin season is that it's kind of, I said this at the time, like what they actually achieved is a little bit overrated just as a singular season. If it could have been a building block moving forward, then it would have been fantastic, considering the growth from the season before to that season. But because Rudin was one and done, you have to treat the season as one and done. And especially since so many of the players have moved on since, we've almost got a new squad here. So yeah, look at it in that context. They finished 6th and they lost in the first round of the playoffs. I mean, if that's your high watermark, then you're not much of a club, are you? So obviously that's something they want to build upon, and it's something they should probably be able to build upon, to be honest.
Lovely jubbly, wildcard. We'll slide into some Flying Kiwi stuff here, and we have so many Flying Kiwis around the world that it's impossible to touch on all of them. So I just want to go direct to the Wobbly Wildcard and get which players and which situations, which I think is also an interesting point in all of this, is the situation these players are in, and get your thoughts on what is tickling your taste buds at the moment. So we'll start with the women. Obviously the Football Ferns, they were coming off a World Cup campaign that was a wee bit disappointing, but in the grander scheme of things, you could suggest that they are building towards something better and brighter. Which of the female Flying Kiwis is interesting you the most at the moment? Give me 2 or 3, and perhaps in the context of the Football Ferns and growth and development moving forward, what situations are you keeping an eye on specifically with the Flying Kiwi Wahine?
Rightio, I am gonna say 1A, 1B, 1C for my first option, and go with the NWSL players over in the States, where it's just there's 3 of them right now. You got Abby Erceg at North Carolina Courage, who are the defending champs. You've got Rosie White, who recently signed for Seattle Reign, and you've got Katie Bowen playing for the Utah Royals. Utah Royals and Seattle Reign actually played each other last weekend, and the Royals won 3-1, which was a pretty big result for them, actually, because they were in danger of, they'd had a couple bad results, and all of a sudden they won 2 games in a week, and they're back in the playoff hunt again. And that's where it really gets exciting, because the Courage last year, captained by Erceg, were the best team this league has ever seen. They had the best single season anyone has. They were like records for points, records for wins. They won the championship. Like, they were just outstanding. And, really disrupted by the World Cup they were. So a lot of players have been in and out, and they've struggled for consistency, especially, just looking at centre-back, for example. They had their star back pairing is Abby Dalkemper and Abby Erceg, Dalkemper being a starter for the American team. So obviously playing for America, she was out for basically the whole start of the season. Then Erceg was playing with a backup centre-back next to her, then she was gone, so they had a completely new pairing. Erceg comes back from the World Cup, Dalkemper comes back, then she disappears because America are playing more friendly games, because apparently the logic in America is that instead of just paying the women's players a little bit more and giving them an actual reward for winning the World Cup, they have to go and earn that reward by going on to like a victory tour thing, which means disrupting their domestic league once again, which there's a lot of things, well, I'll just leave it and say Americans. It's Americans trying to do stuff. So that's been a bit of a funky one for them because they're struggling a little bit just for consistency, the Courage, and they lost on the weekend, and Erceg scored an 84th minute own goal for the what proved to be the winner, but one of those unlucky ones where it's just sort of a bobble that goes astray. So they're not quite at the level they were last year. They're struggling to keep up, but they should still make the semis, and they're going to be pretty competitive against anyone who they play at any point, especially considering that they should get stronger as their international, especially their American international players are integrated back in there. Then you've got Seattle, who are also currently sitting fourth, and they're looking pretty useful to make the semis as well. They might need a bit of a push because there's still pressure on from Utah in particular. Rosie White came in and played off the bench in her first game, and then started her next two in midfield, one in sort of a deeper role, one in a more attacking role, and she looks to be playing that sort of attacking midfield role from now on, it seems. And she scored the winner in 1-0 wins in her first two starts, so those were pretty crucial points for that team trying to hold on to their position. It's going to be tough because it looks like it might be Seattle versus Utah for that last spot, because Portland are pretty bloody good, and there's someone else up there as well, I forget, who's also going to be sitting in those top ranks. So it might come down to one or the other, but it's still possible that we get all three New Zealanders in the semi-finals. And the Utah Royals, Katie Bowen just going about her thing, playing right back, playing 90 minutes every game. Nothing spectacular in that position because they've got some very good attacking players in front of her, and they've got an excellent defence, the Royals. And at the start of the season, they were sort of like winning games 1-0 just because they could hardly concede. They struggled to score goals, but they would score just enough. And they had a bad sort of patch of form recently where they struggled. They started conceding goals and they didn't score anymore, so suddenly that one goal a game wasn't enough, but scored 6 goals in their last 2 games, so maybe they're coming around. So that whole situation is fascinating to watch as that season sort of trends towards the Showtime period of that thing, the big time, the playoffs and all this. Moving across the pond, there are a couple interesting situations as the European season gets underway. I think one that's definitely worth a watch is Ellie Riley, who's just transferred to Bayern Munich, because that's what New Zealanders do now. They play for Bayern Munich. She is, based on preseason so far, they're starting this weekend. She seems to be the first-choice left-back, and first-choice left-back for a team that's going to be challenging for the Bundesliga title. I mean, a lot of New Zealanders have played in Germany over the years. Still got Michaela Moore, who, from the Achilles injury she suffered during World Cup preparation, she won't play till at least December, probably not till after the winter break, so coming back sort of mid to late January or so. But she's still there at Duisburg, and Paige Satchel is about to start her first professional campaign with SC Sand as well. So there's a couple there currently, but Ellie Riley playing for Bayern Munich, they were second last year and made the Champions League semi-finals. So she's had a lot of Champions League campaigns in her time playing in Sweden, so nothing out of the ordinary there. Chelsea also made the semi-finals of the Champions League last season, although she didn't play very many of those games because she was a backup. But yeah, that's going to be fun, seeing someone actually pushing for silverware on a couple different fronts there. And I guess just because the English Super League is maybe the most interesting of all the European leagues at the moment, because we're seeing just like the English women's game off some pretty good success over the last couple World Cups, and in between from their national team, I think, and seeing some of those big Premier League clubs, and we've already seen the financial power that the Premier League has with all their men's players and all this, with the transfer window that just wound up, and we're seeing a lot of those big clubs investing in their women's side as well. So it's a pretty interesting and really quickly growing scene to be a part of. There's normally a couple Kiwis in there. At the moment, there's only one. It's who have we got there? Transferring from West Ham to Tottenham Hotspur, we've got Rhea Percival, and she, first of all, it'll be interesting to see whether she plays right back or centre mid for them. That doesn't start till September, so a couple more weeks till they kick off. But yeah, the lone Kiwi as it stands in the Women's Super League in England is always an interesting watch. Probably worth keeping an eye on Katie Rood in the Championship below that as well, because she's one who's played for a couple high profile clubs. She was an inaugural member of the Juventus team that came straight into existence and won the title in Italy, but she didn't play a lot. She was more or less a reserve most of the time. Spent some time at Bristol City, but didn't get a massive amount of games there as well, so she went on loan to Lewis in the second division, and that's where she has signed permanently since, and should be for the first time since she went over to play in Europe, should be in an opportunity where she's going to play most games and hopefully score a lot of goals. So I think that's one sort of more undercover to watch, my fourth option there. Probably wraps it all up, I think, in that way. There's a couple of good, well-informed players in the sort of playing over in the Scandinavian leagues. Vic Essen and Rebecca Stott playing at Valtnes in Norway. CJ Bott at Vizio in Sweden. So, it's, of course, there's also Erin Naylor at Bordeaux in France. So, plenty to keep an eye on as the European season rounds into focus over the next week or two.
If you had to just choose one as someone who our listeners should pay the most attention to, maybe they have the most upside in their situation, maybe they are the most talented of all this group, or whatever it is, if you could just recommend one player for our listeners just to keep tabs on, who would that be?
That, without a shadow of a doubt, would be Abby Erceg, who is the best New Zealand women's player and currently playing at the highest quality of club. Kind of good timing for this as well, because obviously, first of all, she's going to be pushing to repeat as champions with the Courage, but just as this very week, the International Champions Cup, or whatever they call it, the same sort of organised friendly games that they had pre-season for all the big men's clubs, which Sarpreet Singh played a little part in while he was over in America with Bayern Munich. They've got like a little 4-team women's competition that's going on to get a couple of the bigger sort of Champions League clubs some preparation before their season. So it's just sort of like a straight semi-final thing. It's Olympique Lyon, who are far and away the best team in Europe, champions of France basically every single year, reigning Champions League holders. Atletico Madrid, who are probably the strongest team in Spain, although Barcelona are trying to take things a little more seriously. I think Real Madrid might have started a women's team, or thinking of it at the moment as well. I haven't checked in there. There's no New Zealanders playing in Spain at the moment. Amber Hearn technically is, but has been injured, so missed all of last season. And I don't actually know what the situation with that is going forward. So, who was the other team? Oh, Manchester City. Manchester City is the other team as well. So stacked with names that people will recognise from the World Cup. That's sort of like a semi-final, final thing that will take place over this weekend. So Abby Erceg going up against the best in the world there. North Carolina Courage is the second year that they've run this tournament as well, and they won it last year. So it should be fun to watch. They obviously have an advantage playing in America, sort of home field advantage there, and also the fact that they're mid-season while these other teams are pre-season. But still, it's always fun to see New Zealander going up against the very best in the world, and also, might I say, holding her own.
Be a beautiful wildcard. We'll wiggle our way into the men's side of things, and I just want to rule out Sarpreet Singh from the jump. Like, we've talked a bit about Sarpreet Singh. He doesn't appear to have played for Bayern Munich recently. He was on the bench, if I'm
he's
correctly.
Been on the bench in a couple cup games. He hasn't featured yet for the first team in an official game, but you never know. He seems to be in and around the squad. I don't know that there's been confirmation yet of whether he's a permanent member of the first team squad, but regardless, it seems like he's going to spend a lot of time training with them, and I don't think you can expect a guy to go straight into the team anyway. So he's exceeded expectations and then some, just getting at this point.
Yeah, that's it's an easy topic. It's the standout one. It's the headline act at the moment. Sarpreet Singh playing for Bayern Munich, amazing. We've talked about it a fair bit in recent weeks. So I just want to kind of bypass Sarpreet Singh because I think the value for our listeners is going to be in who else is doing things on the men's side of the Flying Kiwis ledger. So same thing here. Which players and situations are you most interested in at the moment with a lot of the football seasons around the world getting underway?
Let me think about that for half a second. I guess there are two guys who are coming back from extended injury layoffs who are within within the best three players that we have available for the All Whites right now, available in quotes because of those injury layoffs, and the All Whites next play in November, which is hopefully enough time for both of them to be back in action. But Winston Reid missed, I think, 14 months of football with that pretty horrible knee injury that he had. There was a setback before last season as well, which ended up ruling him out for all of the previous Premier League season. He came back, played parts in the first three of West Ham's 6 preseason games, and then was held out of their final 3 and wasn't in the matchday squad for their opening Premier League game. So the word is he hasn't re-injured anything. You know, they're just taking it slow. He still isn't. He's back in full training, but he's not in 100% full training. Like, he's still doing some fitness-based stuff on the side to build up strength, build up fitness after such a long time out of the game, really, which has got to be so difficult to come back from after something like that. A similar deal with Ryan Thomas at PSV, where, you know, that was such a big he was the Sarpreet Singh of his time 1 year ago, where such a big transfer, but he never actually got to live it up there because he spent the whole time, he got injured and about a week after he signed in training and busted a knee and hasn't played since. He was held off from most of the preseason stuff for PSV. He certainly didn't play any football, but he did do a bit of training. Like, they just easing him back into it, and he is back in full training now. But he's in full training with the under-19s team just to allow him to play at a level that's a little less physically demanding, to build his strength back up, build his touch, build his fitness, all those things, same as Winston Reid's gone through. So I think those are two pretty interesting situations, because they're guys who we don't, like, we hope, it's always the problem with long-term injuries, you hope the guys will come back the same level that they were before they got injured, but you never quite know. But also just with these guys, it's just, when are they coming back? And obviously their clubs are both going with a careful sort of safety first approach, which is the right thing to do. So those are guys to keep an eye out on as they build their way back towards things. I guess then you've just got to look at the Woodsman, Chris Wood, don't you, and say, here's a fella who's starting most, if not every game in the Premier League and looking to score a lot of goals. He scored 10 of them last year, he scored 10 the year before. I've set him a casual target of 15 this season. I don't see why he can't get to that point. Yeah, just watching a dude like that who can just play every week at such a high level is easy to take for granted once a guy's been there for a little while. But the Woodsman continues to do pretty entertaining things, pretty quality things, certainly from a New Zealand perspective, looking at it all. He was offside 3 times in the first Premier League game of the season. Burnley won 3-0 against Southampton. Chris Wood scored after about 15 minutes, but Ashley Barnes was a mile offside in the lead-up. They didn't even need VAR to confirm that one, so that was never going to count. He was also, I think, for 2 of the goals, he was wide open in the middle and guys shot instead of passing. So, you know, he's getting himself in good positions. It wasn't his best performance. He was a little, I won't say rusty, because he was outstanding in preseason. He scored, I think, 9 goals in 6 games or something like that. He was scoring in buckets. But yeah, he is that kind of player who he'll get the ball 3 times, and 2 of those times his touch will just be awful, and you'll think, what the hell is this guy doing at this level? And then he'll do something brilliant and score and make a complicated goal look really simple and easy, just with strength and balance and skill, and for that 3rd time. And so he's that kind of guy, and you know, he's going to be there and thereabouts poaching some goals for Burnley, so I'm hoping he can get up to that 15 goal mark. He's a nice, probably an easy one for me to pick, to be honest, but always an enjoyable one to watch. I do always, when I'm looking at my Premier League viewing schedule for the week, I do always keep an eye out to see when Burnley are playing, if it's something nice and easy. Otherwise, I guess the old replay in the morning never goes astray. Chucked him in my fantasy team too, just quietly, because that's how confident I am that he's going to have a big season.
There you go. You always know you're set for great things if you crack the Wildcards fantasy team.
Nah, I don't think that's fair. On the strength of my fantasy teams the last few years, I think the opposite's probably true. More of a curse than a blessing.
If you had to choose one super duper undercover brother, who would that be? Who's your hipster pick for a guy that our fans and listeners should be paying attention to that no one else is going to be talking about in the world of Kiwi footballing matters? Like, what's your hipster pick for the men Flying Kiwis?
Let's see. There's a super duper undercover one in Nick Zanev, who has started the first 3 games for AFC Wimbledon in League One. It's not, League One's probably comparable to A-League, I think, probably. The top teams in League One might be a little, I don't know, the top teams in the A-League are fairly decent as well. It's hard to judge. But, yeah, he's played a few games there. They got knocked out of the League Cup this morning before recording, and he started that one, and I think he gave away a penalty after about 5 minutes, but the penalty was missed, and then they went into a penalty shootout. He saved one, but they lost overall on the shootout, so interesting times for him because they don't have a standout number one goalkeeper. They do have this fella from West Ham called Trott or something like that, who's on loan, but he's injured at the moment, which is why Zanev is getting a run. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes, because if that injury is a little more serious, he's back at West Ham at the moment getting treatment, which is the normal thing to do with loan clubs. The higher up team tends to have the better medical facilities, so it just makes sense. But, if that injury turns out to be fairly long-term, or if Zanev plays really well, that loan deal might not last as long. And, yeah, I think he's in an interesting position where he could maybe push to play more regularly, but hard to say. At least he's going to be in matchday squads this season for them, but that's not the highest level out there, so I think I can probably aim a little higher than that myself. Michael Veld and James McGarry are always interesting at Willem 2. I forget how to say 2 in Dutch. Zwei, that's German, isn't it? I only know that from Cool Runnings as well. So those two are going to be on the bench most weeks for them. Veld is currently coming back from an injury in pre-season, so he's not involved at the moment anyway. But it's always interesting when one of those guys gets a run in the top flight in Holland. I'm thinking the best one to chuck out there right now might be Nico Boxall, who, the brother of Michael Boxall. He's playing really well at the moment for Minnesota United and MLS. Nico has played a couple times for the All Whites, I believe, and starts every week for Viborg in the second tier in Denmark. So you got Marco Rojas playing in the top tier. You got Boxall playing in the second tier. You've also got Eli Just and Dalton Wilkins in the third tier there in Denmark. Viborg, the last 2 seasons, have been pushing pretty hard to get promoted, and they haven't quite managed it. They got to the playoffs last year and lost out. So they're one of the better teams there. They win more often than they don't. They're a team that has a New Zealander starting every week at centre back, and not the highest tier in the country, not the top highest quality of league overall compared to obviously compared to someone like for example Chris Wood, Winston Reid playing Premier League, but certainly one of those teams with a lot of upward progression, and hopefully this will be the year that they go one better and actually get promoted to the top skis there in Denmark, where he can mark Marco Rojas every couple of weeks.
Not the easiest of matchups, those ones. Anything else you want to add, Wildcard, before we wrap it up there? The floor is yours from a footballing perspective. I won't let you talk about anything else, but if you got anything else to add from your footballing perspective, holler at us.
Well, not really. There's not much else going on. I'll say if you got a spare 11 minutes, the Utah Royals did a little documentary thing on Katie Bowen. They seem to be going through a few of the different players, looking at sort of inspirations in their career and things like that. And Katie Bowen's done one which largely focuses on her relationship with her father, who passed away a couple years ago. So it's a really interesting watch, a really well done little documentary thing. It's there seems to be like a sort of little sponsored thing by some I don't know, essential oils company or something like that. So they've got one of those like what are they called, like diffuser things steaming away in the background of the interviews, which is quite funny, and overt product placement. But it got us a nice little documentary, quite emotional at times, really insightful at others. Just quite a funky little insight into one of the better, one of our top flying Kiwis, really, Katie Bowen, out there playing every single week and in the American top flight. So that is definitely worth a watch if you got a spare 11 minutes, that one.
Beautiful, Wildcard. We'll wrap it up there, and we will head on over to do our Patreon podcast, so keep an eye on for the Patreon podcast. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow to do a rugby league podcast, having missed one earlier in this week, so we'll make up for that with all sorts of rugby league nerd notes and a bit of Warriors discussion as well, so keep an eye on that one if that's your buzz. Otherwise, enjoy this football podcast, tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend, and we'll catch you up in the next one. Kia kaha, stay beautiful, peace and love. Keep putting out that positive vibrations for the beautiful humans of planet Earth. Cheer, cheer.